You kidding me with this right now?
Good morning.
Are you kidding me with this?
He wanted to be involved. He's
Yeah.
helping today.
Oh, he's helping all right.
He's helping.
Helping hold things down.
Yep. Happy Forge Friday Coffee Talk.
Happy Forge Friday Coffee Talk.
Pink. Oh, I think
Pink.
pink.
And there he goes.
There we go. Okay. Happy Friday, everybody. I hope you're all feeling pretty good after Murph earlier this week.
Should be recovered by now. It's Friday.
I'm starting to feel, I'm feeling better. I was pretty sore the first 2 days. Mine's like a 36-hour thing. I feel pretty sore about 36 hours after, and then I'm...
Yeah. It did okay because I
did
scaled it a little bit.
Yeah, well, we both did.
Yeah.
You did it in the garage, which I think was actually a cool little version. So that was cool. Swings instead of pull-ups. But
Yeah, so without the pull-up bar, I just did kettlebell swings instead.
which is
Still
just
challenging.
Because it's really not about that. It's about getting the work in. Doing the reps. That's all.
Challenging yourself, pushing a little bit,
Yeah.
and being able to come back and do it again.
Right, which is what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about longevity, which we've talked about before, but we're going to talk about it in a little bit of a different sense. Longevity in Jiu Jitsu specifically. How do you stay in the game as long as you want, as long as you can, right? Longevity in your sport, longevity in Jiu Jitsu. We might at some point do a part 2 of longevity in the CrossFit world, right? But we're going to speak specifically to Jiu Jitsu today.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. I mean, it does pretty much apply across other sports too. So we talked about the CrossFit, Jiu-Jitsu, but pretty much anything that you get into and all of a sudden, like, you find this sport and you love it. Jiu-Jitsu, CrossFit, pickleball, whatever it is.
Running,
But you find this thing and all of a sudden you just want to do that all the time. And you do. So that's kind of what we get into is we do these activities, we love them, we want to do them as much as possible. And especially when it comes to jiu-jitsu, there's a level of intensity that comes because we have our drills in class, which you kind of partner up and do your things there. And then, as anyone who does jiu-jitsu knows, the end of class is usually what we call the live rolling time, where you pick a partner and you just try to take each other's heads off for as long as possible.
Sort of. Figuratively. It's sparring, right?
Yeah,
so
they know.
So it's about how to balance all of that out so that because it can tend to be an intense sport, right? Whether you're competing or not. And so how do you balance everything so that you can keep yourself injury free, keep yourself moving well so that you don't feel like you got hit by a Mack truck every single morning, and still be able to show up and keep doing it for as long as you want. So, be able to participate, show up and participate without feeling like you got hit by a Mack truck every single day.
And we find that when we get older too, that gets a little bit more difficult. So, you can take up jiu-jitsu when you're in your teens and 20s and you probably can roll that intensely every day and wake up the next morning feeling fine and just keep showing up day after day. But as we get older, we start to realize that that's not really so much the case anymore. And now you've got to kind of start being a little bit smarter about how you apply your energy. You get so much energy in the bank, and how do we want to spend that energy throughout the days and weeks as we go? And that's kind of what we want to talk about a little bit here.
Yeah. And if you take, for both of us, we both started later in life. I was, I think 35 when I started. I don't know how old you were. You were older than that.
40 something.
Yeah.
45.
When I first started. So we've had to kind of use these techniques from day one, and it's been a learning curve, I think, for both of us. But I think these are just good skills to learn at an early age, as early as you can, because we don't want to just burn out and then be able to do it for 2-3 years and then feel like we can't keep up with it anymore. So I think the biggest thing that we talk about is this balance of intensity versus frequency. Yeah. Like an intensity versus frequency kind of balance. You take somebody there's a competition world in jiu-jitsu, just like there is in a lot of other sports. Think of Olympians, no matter what sport you're talking about, somebody who gets to that high level of being able to go to the Olympics, or you're at the top of your sport, you're competing a lot, you're winning a lot, all that kind of stuff. If you want to compete at the higher level of your sport, that takes a certain level of intensity and frequency in your training to be able to reach that level. And that comes with a price, right? That comes with a cost. Yes, you might be reaching your goals of being able to compete at that high level, but it does come with a cost on your body and your physical machine, your system, right?
Yeah, we see that with football a lot. I used to work with some high-level football players and NFL guys, and you look at their careers, and of course, those guys are just phenomenal athletes who are able to do things for a short period of time, but they're at the top of their game.
Yeah.
They're some of the fastest sprinters in the world. They're the hardest hitters in the world, and they're doing that to each other every weekend on a football field. And I think there even is a graph where you see like the positions that take the biggest amount of beating, like your wide receivers and your running backs. Again, super athletes, but I think on average those guys play at that level for about 4 to 5 years tops.
Yeah.
And then others like basketball can play a little bit longer because there's less physical impact. So just think of the beating that we're putting our bodies through. And in jiu-jitsu, obviously there's some physical beatings going on. But I think for all of us speaking here, we don't want to just be training jiu-jitsu for 4 to 5 years and then be done with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you hear like these professional athletes who, like, once you get into your upper 20s, early 30s, like your career as a professional athlete is often done. Most of us didn't even start jiu-jitsu till after that fact, right? In our mid 30s, I shouldn't say most of, but a lot of us. So we have to be smart about this. We don't want to have to like retire and hang up our gi after just a few years. So that intensity versus frequency game is important. And so, most of us, while competition in jiu-jitsu is fine, and it is actually a great way to continue to learn the game in a certain way and to learn, there's a lot to learn from competition. Most of us are not going to be competing at that high level all of the time. So, if you decide that you do want to compete, that's totally fine, but understand the goal at hand. I think that's kind of important. I think I know I got caught up in this early on where I was like, oh, well, I'm going to train, but I'm also going to compete, but I'm also going to start a business, but I'm also going to do CrossFit, but I'm also going to do this, but I'm also going to do that. So to kind of be clear about your goals, I think is probably the first step, is be clear about your goals. If you want to compete at a high level, awesome. But know that that's going to take a certain level of intensity and frequency to train for that and to be at that level. And your body's not going to handle that forever, right? So
and also realize that you don't have to compete.
Right.
I just found this out recently that of all the people that train and practice jiu-jitsu, only 3% of those people actually compete.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. There's so many jiu-jitsu gyms around the country and around the world nowadays. In the last couple of decades, it's just really exploded. And yeah, I mean, it sounds like if you see all the highlight reels, right? So it seems like on Instagram everybody's competing, but that's not necessarily the case.
A lot of us are out here just doing it for fun.
Yeah, we've both competed,
got our reasons.
We've both competed, but it's not something we do on a regular basis. But yeah, so competition is great. It can be a big part of the game. It doesn't have to be, but just know that does take a certain level of intensity and a certain frequency of your training, and your body can only handle that level for so long.
Yeah.
So intensity is a big thing. Ways that you can modify, I guess isn't the right word, but like ways that you can kind of control that so that you can kind of be more on this longevity game and not as much on the intensity game is to take a couple things into consideration. So your day-to-day training, right? I think the first thing is to know that you can control how intense you train within each class that you take. You don't have to go 110% redlining in every single class that you go to. Sometimes it's harder to do than others. Kind of depends on your school and your instructor and the people that you train with. But ultimately, you have control over how hard you're training and how intense you're training each time. So maybe that looks like sitting out a round once in a while during class, like every other round instead of every round. Maybe that looks like picking and choosing the right partners for you. Like maybe you're not rolling with the 18-year-old wrestler who is just going to go balls to the wall and beat the hell out of everybody because he doesn't know any different, right? Like maybe that's not your training partner that day. Maybe you pick somebody who you can trust to kind of chill a little bit.
Yeah, and communicate with your partner too.
Yes.
So if you do pick someone and you are not feeling it, then just let them know, like, hey man, let's work on some positional drills or something like that today. Let's start from this position. Maybe let them know that, I'm not looking to go all out today. Let's just kind of, flow roll if someone's up for doing that or knows how to do it.
Knows how to do it, I think, is the more important thing.
But then otherwise, you are in control, especially when you reach a certain skill level in jiu-jitsu. You can always kind of learn how to slow the roll down a little bit.
Yeah.
Be like my old man jiu-jitsu. Like I'm going to sit down and I'm going to play half guard,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Being in control of that. And communication is key because it is, jiu-jitsu is mostly, there's two people involved, right? It's not a solo sport. So communication with your partner is really key. So, controlling that within each class. I think the frequency, then we can talk about frequency, is limiting how, or not limiting, but like managing how frequently you're going. You don't have to show up to the gym 6 and 7 days a week, every single week, in order to make progress. Mm-hmm. Again, it depends on your goals, right? If your goal is competing, then your intensity for that period of time that you're training your intensity, your frequency might need to be higher. But for the long game, this is for any sport, like even professional athletes take rest days, right? Like your body needs that. Your body needs that, like that push, but then it also needs that time to rest and recover and regenerate in order to eventually be able to keep making progress down the line.
Yeah. And then even in terms of the longer term, like if we talk on like a monthly or even like a seasonal basis, there's periodization that we do like with weight training or things like that. You're actually going to make more progress when you give your body almost like a complete vacation off of training a little bit, because you have these little aches and pains and sorenesses that kind of just show up and they just don't go away, no matter how much stretching or rehab or any kind of stuff you do. But when you take a little bit of time off from training altogether, maybe just doing like active recovery stuff, some physical therapy, then your body actually does kind of like fill the battery level again and be ready to go again for another season of activity.
Yeah.
And you end up making better progress and more gains than you would if you had just been going, because there's this mentality mindset of like, we've always just got to keep training and the only easy day was yesterday and you've got to just keep doing more and more and more. And biologically, physiologically, our bodies are just not about that.
Not built for that.
Yep. So we need those breaks.
I think intentionality with that is important because so kind of planning that in a little bit, right? Like planning in, maybe there's a week that, maybe for us females, there's usually a week out of every month where we just feel really crummy. And sometimes I know personally I can train through that in a way that I can control. But then like other weeks, other months, I just need to take it more and easy, right? So, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be, you just kind of plan for it, but being intentional about it. And that way you're not going to get stuck being forced into it by, say, like an injury or an illness or something like that. Be intentional with your periodization, with your rest, whether it's several days at a time or even a week at a time, so that you don't have to be forced into it by these things that are more outside of our control. So dropping controlling your daily intensity with your training, controlling your frequency week by week and month by month, taking intentional periodization, we call them in weight training like these mesocycles, right? So you might train hard and kind of push yourself for like 6 or so weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. And then you might take a whole week where you're just doing some stretching and mobility and really light weights and all that kind of stuff. And you can do the same thing with jiu-jitsu. So these intentional periodization kind of mesocycle breaks is another great way to just manage all of that.
Yeah. And that's one way for your body to help build itself stronger too. So it's not that you're taking that time off because you've got an injury. So there is a difference of that, of saying like, well, you hurt something, so now of course
you're forced into it.
Yeah, or you had to go get a surgery because you ruptured something. So congratulations, now you're taking 2 or 3 months off that you didn't plan on doing.
Right.
And that happens, but what we want to try to do is minimize that as much as possible by making your body as strong as possible in the meantime. Yeah. So the rest and the recovery times are key to doing that.
Yeah, and planning them in, mapping it out, being intentional with it so that you're not forced into an even longer one. And then, on top of all of that, your day-to-day, like making sure you're hydrated, making sure you're eating enough food for your recovery and your muscles to recover, and making sure that you're sleeping, making sure that you're all of that stuff that we preach about all the time is all a big part of it. Those are day-to-day things that will always help keep you in the game longer. If those things aren't on point, all the other stuff we just talked about is for naught, because those are like fundamental basics. But yeah, I think that's about it. Is there anything else we wanted to touch on that?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah. So, controlling your intensity when you go to class day to day, controlling your frequency and honoring your body when you need to, giving yourself those rest days. And then, consider taking longer breaks every once in a while, a couple of months, and then take a longer break, a couple of days in a row or a week or something like that. So these kind of create these mesocycles, controlling who you're rolling with in your classes, all that kind of stuff. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's about it. So if you've got any questions about that, hit us up in the comments or shoot us a DM. Let us know. We'll love to chat. And tomorrow we will be at North Star Fitness doing a deadlift workshop, pain-free deadlifts, which is going to be a lot of fun. We love teaching the deadlift.
Strengthen that back and those hips, yo.
Yep, and especially for your, it's at a CrossFit gym, but especially for you jiu-jitsu practitioners, we need to get stronger. That's also going to help with your longevity in the sport. Build your muscle mass so that your joints are supported and protected. So if anybody's interested in that, let us know. There's a link in the bio to sign up for it. Otherwise, we will see y'all next week.
See ya.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.